This week on Quality Digest Live, Peter Holtmann of Exemplar Global chats with us about careers in auditing.
Plus, in this month's CMSC Corner segment, we examine the power of papers presented at the Coordinate Metrology Society Conference. That and more when we come back. Welcome back to Quality Digest Live for December 18th, 2015. QDL is your weekly look at who and what is making the news in the world of quality. I'm Mike Richmond, publisher of Quality Digest.
That you are, and I'm Quality Digest editor-in-chief, Dirk Ducharme. Well, I was struck this week by a story on NPR called What Gets Made in LA is Way More Than Movies, because it addresses the lament we often hear, often talk about in the media and at home or maybe even in casual conversation, that manufacturing is dying in the United States, that there are no more manufacturing jobs, that everything is being outsourced, everything is made in China, and that this is an awful thing. But I think that is a little bit too simplistic a picture. I mean, certainly manufacturing jobs have dwindled in the US, we know that. But productivity has increased. We in the United States make more with less. A whole lot more with a whole lot less. According to Forbes, US productivity has more than doubled since 1983. And rising productivity frees up resources for other activities and generally raises the standard of living. Now, of course, this is of little solace to those who have lost their manufacturing jobs, but I think it does paint a different and more complex picture of the state of U.S. manufacturing than most of us like. We tend to like binary options. It's simpler that way. The fact is, industry, manufacturing is shifting, as it has always and always will shift. Think of the shift in the past from an agrarian society to an industrial society that happened not all that long ago in the United States, and what that did to, makers of tools that supported an agrarian economy. There were a lot of people who lost jobs during that shift. Was that shift bad? A lot of the stuff is still made in the US, but now it tends to be high-tech stuff, manufactured with fewer but more skilled workers. In California, we don't need to look any further than Silicon Valley, just a couple hours south of here, for high-tech and semiconductor production, or Los Angeles with its huge aerospace industry and cut-and-sew apparel industries. Did you know that? Mm-hmm. Cut-and-sew apparel, LA, big industry.
It's a big industry for LA, yep.
And it's not as though LA hasn't lost manufacturing jobs. Sure, it has. But manufacturing has also reinvented itself there and in other parts of the U.S. These nowadays tend to be more specialized, higher tech manufacturing facilities with a more highly skilled labor force than your father's manufacturing jobs. And it's not just high tech assemblies and finished goods. It's the precision parts needed to build those products. Things like screws even. You don't buy the types of fasteners needed in aerospace from Home Depot. Those fasteners, precision screws for instance, are manufactured in LA for the aerospace industry. And there's a lot of other parts that go into this. And all of that also takes skilled labor. So if there is a problem with manufacturing in the US, I would say that a big part of the problem is that manufacturing technology is growing faster than the skilled labor force needed to supply it. Manufacturing is changing. Our industrial society is changing. And you have to ask yourself, is that really bad? If the change in manufacturing is so bad, why does our GDP continue to grow? Why is post-recession unemployment back to about where it has been for decades? It's because we adapt as we always have. Manufacturing isn't dead. It's not even dying. It's changing. And that, I think, is actually a good thing.
It is a good thing. I mean, that and NPR did a great thing with putting that piece on.
Yeah, they were looking specifically as LA is kind of a microcosm of what's going on in the U.S. in particular, but.
Yeah, and there's a lot of issues that touches on too. I mean, you talk about like the precision screws and fasteners. I mean, there's a lot that goes on there that can only be done there. I mean, there's a lot of counterfeit parts too that come into the market too. But sure. I mean, the parts that are real and the parts that are needed are made right there. So it's a big part of the industry. And like you say, it's not necessarily going away. It's just changing. It's morphing into something else.
And obviously, I mean, and you can't ignore this. People do lose jobs.
Yes.
Whenever
Yeah.
there's a major shift.
Sure.
People lose jobs. I mean, and it's bad for them, it's hard for them, and you don't want to downplay that. You don't want to pretend that isn't existing, because it does exist. And that has to be remediated somehow. But it doesn't mean that for the United States as a whole or for the economy as a whole that this is a bad thing. It's bad on, let's say, the personal level, the individual level. Yeah, and you can't lose sight of that. You can't lose sight of that.
No,
but it's the idea that, I don't know.
No,
pet peeve.
Good. No, good stuff. Good stuff there, Dirk. Thank you. All right. Well, with the recent release of ISO 9001:2015, the need for skilled auditors is more important than ever before. The problem, however, is that the auditing population is aging, and precious few young professionals are stepping up to replace their older colleagues as they retire from industry. That's surprising because auditing is a good career choice for many with solid compensation and benefits. Even more, when it's done right, auditors add great value to the organizations with which they work and are a key part of the pursuit of excellence overall. Exemplar Global is an organization providing credential management and many different kinds of personnel certification, including for internal and external auditors. The company recently compiled a survey titled The Auditing Profession Career Pathway that asked about the skills, challenges, and opportunities presented by auditing as a profession. The white paper summarizing the research is available online at www.exemplarglobal.org. So, to chat with us now about the findings from that survey, we're pleased to introduce Exemplar Global's president and CEO, Peter Holtmann. Peter, welcome to Quality Digest Live.
Hi, guys. How are you? Thanks for having me on the show this morning.
Of course, it's our pleasure. Thank you for joining us early. You're in Sydney, and it's early there, I know, so thank you for getting up and joining us on QDL.
Thank you, my pleasure.
As it stands now, let's kind of get right into it. As it stands now, from your perspective, who gets into the auditing profession and how do they do so?
Yeah, it's interesting. At the moment, currently, we're seeing mostly males around about the 50-year age mark or a little bit older that are leaving some sort of quality technical role or some quality management role, and they're using it as the next job to take on before they go into a retirement mode. And that's a traditional sort of role that these people are taking on, but that presents an interesting problem for the industry moving forward. Actually,
the survey, and I'm glad you touched on that because the survey uncovered some interesting findings about that and about the barriers to entry for the profession, especially with regard to age and gender. So, can you give us a bit of a snapshot into those results and some of the reasons why these barriers maybe still exist?
Yeah, it was really interesting when we completed the survey, just what people were saying about the industry and how to get into it. And the perception currently is that you need to have at least 15 years of manufacturing or quality industry experience. In the more specific technical areas, they're expecting someone to have a graduate degree or something higher, maybe a master's or a PhD. And then a very high amount of quality industry experience. And that's potentially a very big barrier for the younger audience who want to come into the market, because when they talk to these people that are already in the market, they're hearing this story, oh, well, you need to have the 15 years experience, you need to have all of these extra credentials, and a lot of the younger audience coming through just don't have those credentials. So it puts up quite a barrier for entry to become a professional auditor.
Well, you bring up a good point then. I mean, it sounds like you're making the connection between experience and credibility, and those seem to be intricately linked for auditors, certainly in the minds of auditees. So how do you address that?
Yeah, and the interesting thing is that once we completed the survey, not only of the auditors in the marketplace, but also of their customers, the thing that came out the most is that credibility is based on the personal attribute, and in that regards, they talk about the interpersonal relationships attributes that people bring to the role. So there's a little bit of a misnomer out there that the credibility really is linked into the qualification. What's really important is how you resolve problems on site with the client, how you add value to the client in a very effective and efficient manner, and that you're actually leaving the client at the end of the day with a perception that there's some value left on site. And again, the best way of doing that is through your personal skills and your interpersonal relationship qualities, that you work with the client rather than just going in and saying, the standard says this, you're doing that, thanks very much, and walk out the door. So credibility is something that can be earned very quickly, and it doesn't necessarily have to come over 15 years of work experience.
Right, and your survey kind of uncovered that a little bit. I mean, again, coming back to this idea of barriers to entry. I mean, there was a gap there, especially a gender gap. I guess is really the interesting thing that I saw, that younger women, especially as I understand it, really don't feel like this is a profession that they normally will go into. Do you find that is the truth from the survey results?
Absolutely. The majority of the women that we surveyed, and interestingly, the statistics show that we've got about 80% male-dominated industry here. So by that alone, it creates a barrier to entry to women who feel somewhat ousted out of the industry. But they come with the perception that it's the old boys club. That was some of the wording that came through from a number of the females, and that it's quite a dominant industry. And if you're not quite aggressive in your stance within the industry, you're not going to make it. And I don't think that's the actual case once you get in there, but that's the perception of the female audience that's working in the space. And that's an attitude or an attribute that we're actively trying to change.
Let's talk about mentorship for a minute, because I think it's important really to any job in any organization, but there seems to be something of a mentor gap maybe in the auditing profession. So what actions should long-term auditors take to help bridge that gap and encourage young people to join their ranks?
Absolutely. This is a critical issue for our industry right now, is when we're seeing that 75% of our audience is now 65 years of age or older. I mean, we've even got auditors now that are working up past their 80s. And these people are going to be retiring within the next 5 to 8 years. And with them, they're taking the knowledge and the technical skills that the industry really needs. So a mentor program is really important for these people that will be thinking about leaving the industry, to pass on that essential technical knowledge, problem-solving analysis, and specialist information they've learned over the years and give it to the younger people that are coming into the industry, because it's going to take them time to learn these things. And if we don't have a mentorship program set up, a lot of this is going to go away, and we'll end up with somewhat of a professional industry paralysis, which is kind of a scary thought, actually.
It seems like, I mean, a lot of these older auditors, there's some tribal knowledge there, as you allude to, and there's ways to provide value that kind of you can't really get out of a documented procedure, right? I mean, you need to have a certain personal connection with the auditee and the company that you're auditing. Is that an accurate assessment?
Absolutely. And, we can teach anyone auditing skills, and we know that most auditors learn all of their skills within the first 2.5 years of entering the auditing profession. 2.5 years. And yet they stick around, most of these auditors, 15, 20, 25 years. And it's over that period of time they actually get comfortable with their role, how to use their technical competence to add value to a client, and how to work with the client in more of an interpersonal way to share that information around. And that's the sort of stuff that we need to share with the younger people, is how do you make a connection with your customer so that they're getting the value out of the process versus it being just another audit, or it's, the more derogatory term for auditing is the tick and flick process. And that's something we're really trying to move away from.
Well, I'm glad you actually touched on that. I mean, I think a lot of people, particularly if they've been audited, have this perception of the auditor as a policeman. Mm-hmm. And you seem to be saying that what the new auditors are being trained as is kind of develop a relationship, so that they're more than just a policeman, right?
Oh, absolutely. And we need to start instilling into people that auditing is a profession. It's not just something that happens as the byproduct of a quality process or as the compliance stage. These people are professionals. They've spent a lot of time honing their skills and becoming quite expert in defining where value can be added on site through a series of auditing steps at the end of the day. And I think it's an incredibly underrated industry. I mean, you see accountants, you see lawyers, you see doctors, all go through the same sort of credentialing process that auditors do, and yet they're held in much higher regard in the community than, say, a quality systems auditor or an environmental systems auditor.
Well, Peter Holtmann of Exemplar Global, that's great. Thank you for joining us and giving us some insight into the auditing profession, the future of the auditing profession. For all of you out there who are interested, make sure you check out www.exemplarglobal.org. You can access their white paper on the findings from the survey there and learn more. So, Peter, again, thank you for joining us early this morning. We appreciate it. We'll see you soon.
Talk. It's good stuff. I like that he's touching on that whole bit about kind of the personal relationship, that an auditor doesn't just waltz in, check off a bunch of boxes and waltz out.
And this is what we're talking about with the experience here, is that that's something that you can't just learn from a document. You can't just say, okay, I'm going to get that perspective from some checklist yourself of learning how to be an auditor. You need to have a personal experience, and you need to learn from people that have done it before how you do that. It's very important. So I think what he's talking about there is really key. So,
absolutely.
So again, check that out at www.exemplarglobal.org and find out more. All right, Dirk. Well, if I told you that one specific group of people in a specific industry were the unsung heroes of radical change, it's a direct quote.
Editors.
Who would you say those folks are? Editors.
Yeah.
You would say the editors are the unsung heroes of radical change.
Publishers. Writers.
I would say that
bloggers.
I would say they're the unsung heroes of unexpected change, of introduced change.
I'd say they're the poorly paid heroes of social change.
Well, you're wrong, because the humble and much maligned middle managers actually are the answer, and that's at least according to the author by the name of Kiwi, I hope I'm pronouncing his name properly, from INSEAD, which is the business school of the world. And we reprinted his article, Even Millennials Need Middle Managers, right there, you can see it, in Monday's issue of Quality Digest Daily. Well, millennials, as we all know, after searching Wikipedia, are those born in the 80s and 90s. So these folks are the youngest, and by some measures, they're actually the largest members, the most numerous members of the workforce. They also tend to be a little bit, I guess you could say, needy.
Needy.
You know, Dirk, they have feelings. These people have feelings, these young'uns, and they're not afraid to express those feelings in the workplace. And in his article, Kiwi actually references this idea that these interns at these big corporations are trying to get on the calendars of the CEOs of these companies to talk about their future in the company. That's not how it works, kids. I'm sorry. These people are usually making a lot of money. So the idea here is that middle managers, right? And in many cases, these middle managers, their operational roles are kind of being reduced or even squeezed out by a lot of things. And technology is a big one. I mean, a lot of times middle managers are people that really are one step removed from the procedure, from the process, from the production itself. And many times these jobs are being kind of squeezed out because it can be done by, the management or the oversight of some of these processes. Can be done, in technology, right? So you don't need the middle managers for that, but you may need them to be mentors. We just referred to mentors in the last story, and you may need them to help guide them, right? And give them the emotional support that they need, because they do need it. We know that these young people need that support. These millennials, as we're talking about, need some emotional connection themselves within the organization. So the role of the middle manager from an operational perspective is probably changing, or maybe going away altogether. But from an emotional perspective, yes, I know you're laughing because I'm talking about feelings again, but it's important stuff. Come on, Dirk, you're an emotional guy, I mean, you want to be coddled.
That's right.
I mean,
Pay attention to my feelings.
That's right. I mean, but that's what this article is talking about. It's important,
Important.
I mean, it's important. I mean, you're talking about a lot of people in the workforce. And actually the article talks about some of the mechanics of their family upbringing and why they're kind of this way, which maybe is right, maybe is wrong. But no, it's true. I mean, they come in the workforce, they need to have some support. And they need somebody to talk to, and a middle manager who's been there and has been with the organization for a while can help. And I think that this is a legitimate thing here. I mean, I think it's logical that this is a role in which they can fulfill, and they can support the organization, support people in the organization by doing that a little bit better.
Finally, a job for middle managers.
That's kind of the takeaway. It's finally something for these middle managers to do. So if you're a middle manager like me, like Dirk, like everybody, take heed.
All right. It's time now for the CMSC Corner. Once a month, we bring in a guest from the Coordinate Metrology Society to talk about metrology training, and the like. The Coordinate Metrology Society's conference, the CMSC, is the only show of its type in North America for portable 3D measurement hardware, software, and peripherals, focused mainly on large volume 3D measurement. Each year at the conference, attendees can see presentations on a wide variety of 3D metrology topics. The papers, which form the basis for the talks and also appear in the thrice yearly CMSC journal. Thrice, I always wanted to work the word thrice into a sentence.
Well, you worked it in.
It is thrice yearly, right?
No, it's actually twice yearly, but it's fine. I mean, it could be thrice yearly if you look at an 18-month period as being yearly.
That's what I was thinking.
Sure, why not?
Okay. The papers are submitted to the CMSC for review, and the man in charge of the committee for reviewing the papers is Scott Sandwith, joining us today via Skype. Hi, Scott.
Hi.
How you doing?
Guys doing?
Oh, pretty good.
We're doing good. You know, it's interesting, Scott. There's three of us here. That's thrice people.
It is.
See, I knew I could work.
There's a unity and there's a symmetry. Maybe not a symmetry, I guess.
It's asymmetrical.
Asymmetrical.
We can try.
Hey, describe for our audience the types of papers that CMSC usually gets. What do they cover?
Oh, that's a great question. I'm quite proud of the variety and the range of technical papers that we're able to get to the conference each year. We get both the technical, where new sensors are being introduced, and they're done so in a technical fashion as opposed to a sales fashion. And then we also get a nice broad range of extensive real-world applications, and those are some of my
No, we're
favorite. Presenting on how photogrammetry is used to help assemble the 787.
Okay, we lost you there for a little bit. But aside from, I think you were talking about some of the case studies. You mentioned the Boeing 747 at the end there. Aside from the case studies, would attendees be able to see highly technical papers on maybe how a certain technology works, or maybe how a particular measurement solution was implemented?
Absolutely. That's one of the core elements of these technical presentations and papers, is to focus on the new sensors and new software concepts and some of the innovative ways that they're being used to deliver solutions. We also end up with several, last year we had 2 workshops where we had experts from the field, for example, from NIST and from NPL come in and provide workshops. NIST did a presentation, or did a workshop on laser scanning, and NPL did one on the basic physics and how laser trackers function and work, and at least up until the current versions of those that we have in the market today.
So Scott, do the papers that you receive, and that again, as Dirk referred to, that run in the journal, the CMSC and the CMSC World e-newsletter, do those papers, they typically talk about just basically one kind of technology involved in large volume metrology, or are there several different technologies involved?
Superb question. What we get is a nice variety. We get papers on laser trackers and 6D, that those are now being used today. But we also see papers on photogrammetry, laser scanning, and we see not just the measurement aspects of those, but we're also seeing papers on the software and how it's being used to integrate it into production processes, and done a number of different projects. We even get some really cool papers, say, on high energy physics, or in how our metrology systems are being used to help build telescopes more precisely.
And what kind of industries typically are we talking about? Is it all aerospace?
Oh, well, there's definitely a large percentage of the papers are on the aerospace industry, because that's where a good chunk of our user base is. But we're also seeing, we also always have papers that include automotive, shipbuilding, energy, for example, in power plant operations, communications, transportations. And for example, in the high energy physics side of things, we see presentations on how particle accelerators are aligned, and again, how telescope operations can be automated. So there's a nice variety of concepts and topics, and there's a lot of exchange between these different disciplines, and the different ways that metrology is bringing solutions to these engineering challenges.
Scott, quickly, we're coming to the end of the segment, but before we wrap it up here, is there still time to submit papers for this year's show? I know CMSC is in July in Nashville this year. Is there still time to get some papers in if people are interested?
Well, you know what? We actually are ahead of the game this year. We got our call for papers out early, and the deadline for submissions is March 11th, 2016. So we're looking for the abstracts to be submitted by then, and there's a nice guideline that's available up on the website, and for how to submit an abstract, and then what our expectations are for the papers, and for the presentations that are delivered. And of course, our conference is in July 25th through the 9th, and We're going to have the decisions on which papers are going to be included in the conference by April 8th. And then final submissions for the papers and presentations is July 15th. So there's definitely time, and we're looking forward to seeing, we've already received several, but we're definitely looking forward to filling out that conference agenda for this coming conference.
All right. Well, Scott Sandwith, Technical Presentation Coordinator for the CMSC. Thanks for joining us this morning and telling us a little bit about what attendees can expect if they go to the CMSC. Some great presentations on a wide variety of topics, technical case studies and so forth. I've been to several of these over the years. I've been to dozens of them. They really are fascinating. I mean, they're not just total, super technical, high over your head. Some of them are, but a lot of them, just if you're an attendee and not really involved deeply in the kind of the minutia of the technical end of it, these are some fascinating case studies about what's being done out in the field with large volume 3D metrology. It's good stuff.
100%. We get a full bouquet of both the deep technical and average everyday application, an application of how to take advantage of these incredible technologies and help deliver solutions.
All right. Well, Scott, thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you, guys. Enjoy the day.
Thanks, Scott. You too. Happy New Year. We'll see you down the line. Yeah, and again, that's www.cmsc.org. For all of you out there who are interested in looking online for how to submit a paper and how to register for this year's show.
In Hollywood, Florida.
No, this year is actually going to be in Nashville.
Nashville, okay.
Nashville, well, right outside of Nashville. So, so nice venue and great show, as Dirk says. So make sure you check that out. All right, well, this is our last show of 2015, and as such, it's a good time, I think, to reflect on the year just passed and the one coming up. Now, most years I write an article around this time with my shallow thoughts on deep topics.
Feelings.
My feelings. And this year, Dirk and Taryn March and the rest of our crack editorial team have given me the spot in the much anticipated Christmas Eve issue of Quality Digest Daily. So be sure to drop anything else you might have had planned for December 24th. I know none of you have anything going on that day. And be sure to check out my article that's coming out again, December 24th. I know.
That's right.
Not much going on. But anyway.
By our editorial team on Crack.
That's right. That's right. Thank you. All right. Well, so what am I writing about, you may ask? I know you're asking that.
I'm interested.
Yeah. Well, don't worry if I know. I mean, my deadline's not actually until Monday, so I don't really know. But I think it's going to be something about the growing trend in our society to take an us versus them attitude in everything. Pretty much everything. I mean, look at the presently unfolding political campaigns in this country, or the threat of climate change, or the worldwide problems of refugees and immigration reform. I mean, in all cases, and I mean, that's a few. There's literally dozens, hundreds of other things just like that. The rhetoric is growing more and more insistent, and the black and white pull of the respective camps on either side of these debates is ever stronger. So the grays, the people in the middle that want to kind of make an agreement, don't have anywhere to go. I mean, you're either white or you're black, and if you're gray, you're doubted by both sides, right?
Right,
I mean,
right. You're wishy-washy.
You're wishy-washy. It's a real problem, and you know it happens in the business world too, right? I mean, you have to admit that it happens here. I mean, think about it. Even in our own little peaceful community of happy-go-lucky quality nerds, we have our share of actually pretty rancorous arguments, you know? Those who think that Six Sigma is a magic bullet versus those that curse its very name, right? Standards aficionados who insist that risk has always been a part, inherent in ISO 9001 versus those who believe that risk has nothing to do with the standard and never should. And of course, to transform or not to transform, that is the question.
There you go.
For statisticians everywhere. It's amazingly passionate argument that you get about that. Well, it's certainly not hard to fall into an us camp and find ourselves wanting to push others into one labeled them. But my feeling is that us and them carry no weight against the power of we. And I mean that in both the English and the French notions. We as a species, saying we to finding, working together and finding common ground and mutually acceptable solutions represents, I think, the best of human community. I have faith in we, and I believe that ethos is going to carry us in 2016 and well into the future. But we starts with you, starts with me. However, so during this holiday season, consider the little things you can do to find common ground with your coworkers or your in-laws or your kids or whomever. At the very least, be respectful of alternative opinions, because respect given usually leads to respect received. And as always, the best way to hear is first to hear. To be heard is first to hear.
Ah.
I think.
Good stuff.
And
Good
that's
stuff. We and we. I
We
like
and
that.
we, yeah. Well, you know,
We and yes.
and yes. Well, you know,
That's good.
and I mean,
Like
you know, it's the political campaign that really has brought this into relief
sure.
for me. And you know, it is an issue. I have family members and friends who take very different, you know, very different positions on these topics than I do. And you know, we try to find common ground, but it's hard. It's hard because I think that the politicians and the media have whipped up this thing where, you know, you have to be one or the other, and it's not true.
Right.
It's just not true. I mean, we're all in this together, and I'm not talking about Americans. I mean, people.
Sure.
People all across the world are the same. I mean, they are all the same. We all have the same desires and needs.
Yeah, same needs, same wants, yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I think it's important to remember that here at the end of the year, that this is the time to reflect on that and to be one, you know, to say we, you know, I mean, in every way, and to think about that because it's important. And I think if we can have that as we go into the holiday season into 2016, I think we're going to be okay.
Well, thanks, Mike. Couldn't have said it better. So there you go. Holidays coming up.
That's right.
Think about we. Think about how you fit in and what you can do to contribute to kind of everybody coming together to agree on something that's important and not be polarized by it.
That's right.
All right. Well, that wraps up today's show, and there is no show next week.
Next week's Christmas Day, next Friday. So no show next week. We'll be back actually on, I think it's January 8th. So I mean,
that would be about right.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
So a couple of weeks off, you can have your freedom to do whatever you want on your Fridays. But thank you all for joining us, Dirk. Thank you for another great year working together, man. It's always a pleasure. Thank you all for being with us this year.
Our director, Chris Smith, and co-director, Christopher Martin. You guys, thanks back there in the control room, and all the editorial staff here at Quality Digest. Well, let's just mention it. You know, Quality Digest is a small company, so it's not hard to run through everybody.
Yeah.
We got Jeff Dewar and Christine Bammert and April Johnson and Laurel Tennis and Taryn March, Christopher Martin,
Ryan Day.
myself, Ryan Day. Oh man, I almost forgot Ryan. Sorry, Ryan.
Ryan Day.
You're not watching, are you?
You, me, Chris Smith. That's pretty much all of us. Yeah. So.
Y'all have a great and awesome Christmas and New Year and Hanukkah and Kwanzaa.
All that stuff.
And all that stuff.
So thanks for joining us again for another great year. We'll see you in 2016. Remember we.
Remember we. So
Thank you all for joining us. We'll see you next year.